Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, and for this post-trade deadline emergency edition, I have Aram in Toronto with me on the show. What's up, Aram?
Hello. I don't know how much of an emergency, but it's definitely an event, I don't know about you, but leading up, a week ago, I wouldn't have thought this much stuff league-wide had happened. Everything seemed building towards it, but it's really interesting how the dominoes all kind of fell, or butterfly effect, or whatever metaphor you want to say, from the Kyrie trade and on downwards, right? So, or maybe it all started with Rui Hachimura. Who knows?
That was the first domino.
But of course, the Warriors had a domino to play in this trade season. So I don't know, for folks who don't know, maybe recap what happened. And recap the timeline, actually, because it was kind of like flying at us pretty fast. And I actually had a work meeting, scheduled right at the deadline. So I was refreshing my timeline a lot, and it took some swings.
Yeah. I mean, it was about an hour left until the trade deadline, and comes in that the Warriors traded James Wiseman for Saddiq Bey. And Saddiq Bey is somebody that we all had our eyes on from the beginning of the season. And it was like, okay, all right, well, work him in there. And then all of a sudden it says the Warriors trade Saddiq Bey to the Atlanta Hawks for 5 second rounders. And I'm not very active on Twitter, but I just had a flurry of like some inspired, uninspired, whatever. I thought they were funny tweets, you know what I mean? About flashing back to the 90s and Gary St. Jean and Dave Twardzik and all this stuff, and Chris Cohan. And then after that, it was the Warriors have flipped those 5 second rounders to the Portland Trailblazers, who had just traded for Matisse Thybulle. And we traded those picks for Gary Payton II, a guy that was a free agent over the summer. The Warriors decided not to sign him not to match his deal, the contract offer he got from the Portland Trailblazers, which was like $8.5 million for 2 years. And instead they moved on and they picked up Dante DiVincenzo. It's been said that part of the calculus was that, they had Wiseman's contract, and so they weren't going to move on from that. They were going to give him a shot and move on from Gary Payton II. And here we are.
So in the end, the Warriors get Gary Payton II back, send out the former number 2 pick. I mean, initially when it was Saddiq Bey, and then he got rerouted for 5 picks, it was like, whoa, like that doesn't seem good. And then parlaying it back into somebody who's familiar, I think Warriors fandom was seemed to be happy about that. But I don't know about you. I guess just the sequence of events from the offseason to now. I love Gary Payton II, all that he did for the team. I think all the things that he can possibly do for the rest of this season and next to help them. It feels a little bit of a letdown, to be honest. I don't know about you, but I think everybody had been pining for what the Warriors had last year in terms of the bench depth and whatnot. But it's also kind of like, we just had this guy and we could have just signed him last offseason, right? This, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like that was all we needed depth this whole year. And so, I get that sunk cost, something's not working out. Don't keep trying to do it, move on from it. I get that. And they literally need bodies. Wiseman's not playing, so this is a rotation body that will help. So for the basketball reasons, I get it. For the business reasons, I get it. But I don't know. Something about it just feels a little bit, is that all there is?
Yeah, I was, of course, a little disappointed because I've been a Wiseman supporter since the 2020 offseason before the draft. And I've talked about a ton on this podcast how I think that kid has just had such a star-crossed early career, and people saying he can't play, all this stuff. And, just to quickly rehash, I mean, you don't need to hear all this. People don't need to hear it again, but it's like, you know, barely played in college. Then there was a long break with COVID, didn't get to work out, uh, gets COVID after he gets drafted by the Warriors. And Clay is out with the Achilles. So all of a sudden, there's all this pressure on James Wiseman to perform. He doesn't fit in with Steph. They don't know how to bring up this kind of unicorn offensively. And then he busts his meniscus, and then he misses a whole season. And then he comes back, and then he gets hurt again, and then he comes back for the summer, looks decent. And then he comes back in preseason, looks okay, and then just can't make it work during the regular season. And honestly, gets blamed for a lot of the early season mishaps and whatnot. And I think that it's unfair, because I think there were a lot of obviously other things going on. And this is something that, in the YouTube comments, I talk to people about, and it's something ultimately that we'll have to decide at the end of the season. But the narrative of it is like the things that went wrong at the very beginning, and whether it's, the punch, whether it's like not signing the right guys over the offseason, whether it's overestimating the lotto picks and how good they would be. Because as much as they got off of OPJ and Gary Payton II, they did sign DiVincenzo and JaMychal Green, who DiVincenzo has been a great fit. JaMychal Green, not so much, but like they did the same thing they did the previous year. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's just that they had a lot of young dudes. And I said this to somebody, that there was a point early in the season where the starters were struggling. And then you looked at the bench and it was like all 5 of the recent draft picks, you know,
bunch
what I mean?
Of babies
sitting next to Andre Iguodala in street clothes. And I was like, ooh, maybe we overshot this one.
Yeah.
And, it is what it is. But like you, it's like kind of like, well, hey, we could have signed the guy over the off season. And if he had been healthy, then maybe this beginning of the season mishap doesn't happen. But then also his abdominal surgery is something he would have done anyway. Yeah. So he wouldn't have been available. And we wouldn't have had Dante DiVincenzo, because even though you could maybe make him fit salary wise, there's no way in heck that DiVincenzo's coming to the team when he's trying to make good and rehab his value, when he wants Gary Payton's spot.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Gary Payton is actually there. But, ultimately, I can appreciate, like you said, the business side of things and the on-court stuff. And this is what the vets wanted. It's like, hey, now they get to run it back with most of the guys that they had last year, at least 7 of them. And then you fill out 8, 9, and 10 or whatever. I don't know the order of the rotation. DiVincenzo is probably 7 still, but like with Kuminga, JaMychal Green, and maybe you pick up a buyout guy. And I was like you. I didn't expect anything to happen too much, but I actually feel like the Lakers moves and the Suns moves, which we get to specifically later, I feel like those kind of triggered something, because there was a part of me that felt like maybe the Warriors thought they could just like keep as is and then improve and then get Steph back and then really just like, get into the postseason and scare people. But I think these moves kind of shocked their system into actually doing something. And at the end of the day, like you said, it's another guy that they can actually play. They're small, but
they're so small. It's going to be so much small ball.
Don Nelson, he must be like smoking a big spliff being like, nice, this is what I want to see.
This is the way yeah.
But maybe they could find someone on the buyout market, but
a few things that you bring up, and I think on Twitter too is some people were pointing to CJ McCollum, pointing out that it was all John Morant saying he was I'm fine in the West, that lit a fire under everybody and say, oh really? Because the West is stacked now, right? Like I think you're right, like I will talk about it later, but the some teams have improved. I mean, it's interesting to think about, like, Gary Payton II coming back. Like, you part of feeling so emo about all of this is that at the end of the day, what has the team shown to instill any confidence in you? Like, obviously, we have confidence in great players. They've played good games against good teams in marquee moments, but the consistency hasn't been there. And consistency is about effort and desire. And are they just tired? You know what I mean? Like this is coming on the heels of that Portland game where they kind of kicked it away, the Minnesota game last week where they kicked it away. And how many games have they had this year where they've done that? Right. And so to me, going into this trade deadline, I was like, there's nobody who's gonna quote unquote, walk through that door and save them. Right. Like they're not gonna save themselves if they're gonna play like this. And there's no evidence to show, other than a few marquee games, there's no evidence to show that they can sustain that focus. Right. So I'm sure the vets like this. All the basketball reasons, all the money reasons, whatever. At the end of the day, like, sure, an extra body is going to help, but I don't think it's going to light a fire under them. I'm reverting back to my my natural Warriors fandom self of being a negative Nelly, but yeah, I don't know. I'm overall pretty discouraged, I'd have to say.
I think it's a really, really fair point, because if all of a sudden they start playing well, is it because they weren't trying as hard? Is it because they didn't really think they had a chance, or they weren't focused? Like, there's all these people, saying like, oh yeah, they were tanking, so then it's like, get rid of Wiseman and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, and I said this recently a couple times probably, that they just need to get into the tournament, and if they're top 9 right now can hold, and if they can find like some emergency big or something like that, which is not easy, then it'll be fun. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Overall, it's a net positive, because you do get a guy that that you can play, that has been there before, and that even though he's 6'3" or whatever, he plays at like a big on offense in this Warriors system, and something that Wiseman could not have done in the next few months, or maybe even in the next year.
They have needed help, like a point of attack. They have needed that, like, DiVincenzo has done an okay job of that. And we know what, GP2 can do. And, you and I have talked offline about like how improving the defense will improve their offense as well, and like raise their level of energy. So, like I can see a path for this improving them overall. So if I was to try to put a positive spin on it, sorry to come on here and be all negative.
At the end of the day, I think there's a ton of positives. Like I said, like, they're a better team now than they were yesterday. And like, I guess for me, it's just like a shame, because I thought that, Wiseman, like, he's not a bad player, right? And I think he's going to do well in Detroit, and that's the right team for him. They're tough, and he gets playing time and whatnot. So I think they'll be pleasantly surprised. But the Warriors are better, and it seems like, hey, the Warriors are showing a commitment to sticking with the core 3 potentially after this season, right? Because now they cleared up some space without Wiseman to maybe sign Draymond. And also, hey, people are like, oh, well, the 2 timeline didn't work. It worked last season. It didn't work this season. And it's not over in a good way, because you still have Kuminga, you still have PBJ, and you still have Rollins and Moody, for what it's worth, whatever those guys can eventually become, whether it's trade bait or you cut them, or they become players. And you have Poole, who's still young too. So like, it's not like the cupboard is full of dust. You know what I mean? So that's good. And I think it's important to keep Kuminga. Another thing on Wiseman though, it's like, it's also a shame, because uh, in his rookie year, there was all this pressure, right? And, uh, he got hurt and it was tough for him, a lot of criticism. And then in the second year, where he didn't even play because of the meniscus, that's when they had some support and they were like a fuller team. And
Mm-hmm.
if he had come back last season, that would have been such a softer landing for him
Yeah.
than this one, where all of a sudden, hey, we got rid of all the vets. Here's more pressure again.
Yeah.
It's just like your rookie year. So, but it is what it is, and you move on.
I would like to, pour one out a little bit for Wiseman. Like on the one hand, the best ability is availability, and he just wasn't healthy or wasn't healthy at the right times. Like he had that stretch where he was going all right and then he sprains his ankle and then he's out and we never saw him again, right? And
Yeah.
so, part of it is just a lot of it is just bad luck. So that's why I think people should just cool it a little bit on um all the pressure and the hate that he seems to be a lightning rod for. People saying he's trash and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's like there's reasons for his performance, right? So just like take it easy on the guy, right? I would personally say that like I'm really interested in, I think probably in the next few months or years or something, like, what's the background of this, like leading up to that draft, right? And who drove the decision. Of course, the Warriors in real like VC speak, they say, well, we're very collaborative. Um, but does ownership really drive that and drive this pick? And what were other things that were available at that time? I'm trying not to go back to that and like replay all of that in my mind too much, because
Right.
at the end of the day, like all I can think about is all the time I wasted in 2020, like thinking about that draft. So much time, as we all did in lockdowns, but that was a lockdown draft. But it's clear it wasn't the right fit, and it was clear that they weren't going to bend the system to make it work for him. Like um, I think that is a broader issue sometimes with the Kerr Warriors system. Is it feels inflexible, and maybe it's more flexible than we as novices are giving it credit for. Um, but I'm just interested how this is gonna play out, how we're gonna hear about this, because I think it's a big deal to have a number 2 pick, not work out. I mean, I was thinking about the Kings, Sacramento Kings, and like they're famously, that's probably like the other recent number 2 pick who got picked over some generational players. I mean, Luka's way better than LaMelo or Tyrese, whatever. But like the Kings, they're fine now, so yeah, like we can take some solace in that. So it's interesting to think about that trajectory. It's gonna be okay. You and I have both long said that you have these young players. In reality, draft picks don't have that high of a success rate, any draft pick. And then also, out of this collection of lottery picks, you really only need one to be good. And if that's Kuminga, then that's great. you know but being confronted with that reality of like, hey, these guys might be terrible, or not on our team, or never do anything good for us, performance wise as a player. It's like, oh, okay, now that reality is hitting us. And so this, our kind of like mantra of saying like, hey, we only need one of these guys to hit, it's now it's playing out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you only need one to hit, but it'd be great if the other two ended up being serviceable role players.
Well,
There's still
yeah,
hope for one.
like the dream would be like, oh, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, right? Like that's the dream. Like if one of those
Right.
two didn't hit, then they'd still, Celtics would still be in good shape, but they're in better shape because both of them hit, right?
Right. It's like, oh, like if Moody became like a Jaden McDaniels, like at least, obviously not the exact type of player, but somebody in terms of somebody who can play, somebody who can actually get on the court and do things. But it's funny because when they got rid of Wiseman, it was like people like, oh, five second rounders, and then it's like Gary Payton II. I mean, you and I kind of felt similarly, but there was a whole uproar of like, yeah, because there was so much
Yeah.
sentimental attachment to
Yeah.
him from last season, which is understandable. But maybe I'm a little bit more pragmatic, or maybe I just have like I wanted to see, like you said, Wiseman was starting to play well, and the twisted ankle, the sprained ankle, kept him out over a month. And then when he came back, he didn't even get on the court. And part of that was like, his courage is stubborn. He didn't get a chance to. I mean, if he didn't get hurt, I felt like he could have passed up JaMychal Green in
Mm-hmm.
the rotation, but it's neither here nor there. I mean, it's just I think he'll do well. I don't think he'll be as bad as Bagley. Although I remember on draft night, a lot of people were like, "Oh man, he's going to turn out like Bagley." Like I had some Sacramento people that I read on Twitter being like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna turn out to be like that guy." But we know that he was an offensive player, like Wiseman was. He was drafted as. That's what he excelled at. And in this Warriors system, he was never going to be a good fit as long as the vets were going to be who they were.
So that's why I'm like, well, I don't want to say it's whose fault is it, right? It's like you take a swing on somebody who has like all of these tools, right? Physical tools. And I'm sure that's what impressed them, right? It's like, um, but if you know your system is not willing to bend to that, then why are you picking somebody? I don't know. Again, you pick for the potential and the upside, and I guess you try to figure it out. But this is what happens when you don't pick or you don't trade for something that is a fit. Like if you're not more sure about it. And I don't wonder, is it they did they think that their core would be done, would be washed by now, right? Right, because it's like, oh, by the time he's ready, these guys will be on their way out, and we'll have a new system. You know what I mean? I mean, it's interesting to see what were all the decisions and the whole matrix of calculations that went behind that pick in a time where they literally couldn't see him, right? Like, I mean, that there were some real issues that year in terms of like seeing players work out, meeting with them. I think they had one meal with him or something like that, or one day with him, and the
Mhm.
others as well.
Right, exactly. Like they didn't get to do all their homework, the usual meetings, the usual do these exercises or do do these drills and all that stuff. And again, it's like if you go back to that draft day, it's Clay tore his Achilles that morning. Poole was not who he is now. I mean, and we don't know really much about, or they didn't know much about what direction they were going in. Anthony Edwards was taken already, so
Mm-hmm.
and it was pretty clear that the Warriors did not really want LaMelo Ball. Those were all the signs, and it is what it is. Like I think it's just a bummer. Like if I guess for me, it's just like, oh, I never really felt like the kid got a shot to
Yeah.
show how good he could be, or prove me wrong that he really is just a kind of a one trick pony in terms of just he can score a little bit, but he can't rebound, he can't block shots, he can't do. Those were his weak spots, and I felt like he was learning some of that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but then it just time ran out. But like I still thought, and I credit you with pointing this out to me like a couple months ago. It's like I thought, and I even said this after the Portland game in the last episode yesterday, that hey, if it's really the contract, the luxury hit, trade him in the summer when you can see how this season ends and see what direction you want to go in, and then maybe package him for a bigger fish. Seeing this now, it's like that's why I say, oh, these moves by other teams might be the things that kind of triggered,
Yeah.
accelerated the desire to, okay, like we can't just really sit if we can't get any like another big fish or take any
Yeah.
massive swings. Let's bring back the team we had last season and prove that somebody can beat us in a 7-game series.
Yeah.
You know,
I think the other thing it maybe doesn't it's not proving it, but it's in that thought process of trading him in the offseason, combining him with either you would have, if you're going to take a big swing, you'd have to combine him with either Wiggins or Poole. So in some ways it also reflects how they think of those players and their contracts, and that like, oh, they think those players are good and good value. So because that was my thing, is like, oh, if Wiseman's making 12 and either Poole or Wiggins they're making 23, 25, then that adds up to like near max level, right? But on their own, probably doesn't do that, right? So it's interesting in that respect that it probably solidifies their, where it reveals how the team is thinking about those two players right now as long-term like fixtures, really. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think thinking about the offseason and also, well, if we rewind it back before offseason, we have a lot, a third of the games left to go. There's going to be buyout market. You mentioned maybe picking up some depth big. So I did do some internet scouring,
I knew it.
and and I have a list for you.
I love it.
Now these aren't just bigs, but these ones seem to be rumored to be bought out or have already been said to be or will be bought out. So I'll skip over. We'll go to the bigs first. So there was Dwayne Dedman,
Just got released.
original Warrior, I think. Nerlens Noel. I mean, Detroit has a ton of bigs now, and he doesn't want to be there. Serge Ibaka, because those are the three bigs that I have. Are you interested in any of those?
If there's no one else, I would take Serge Ibaka. I haven't watched any of these guys play in a long time. I know Serge Ibaka's old.
I know.
But I will take Ibaka for his shooting.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. I will take him for that. And his overall, he was the best. He's had the best career. Like, he's reached the highest level, I think, as a player. And I would take him and barely play him and stuff. But yeah.
He has a YouTube show that he started when he was up here. So, that could be interesting. Like, where they eat,
added plus.
They eat, uncommon things.
Right.
Yeah, I do think it would be nice to have a depth big because, I mean, Wiseman was not playing, but he was active and like he was available to play. Like, if there was an emergency, you could play him. So I think they need to fill that role. Because as we said, they've got a really small team. Have a few other buyout candidates. I'm sure there will be more. Reggie Jackson, any interest?
No, I don't need any more guards, man.
Will Barton.
Oh, killer instant offense. But again, like, we're just so stacked with guards, and you could always use more wings, but I just don't see where he slots in for playing time. Would he take time from Kuminga? Would he take time from Wiggins?
I'm not interested. His defense is not great. It's like Russell Westbrook.
Nope. For every reason you can imagine.
Okay. Well, okay, then you mentioned at the top, like, it was a kind of a crazy trade season. What are some of your thoughts on
Let me ask you, like, so basically, like, it's just crazy to me that the Nets were in 4th place in the East, and all of a sudden, like, their 2 best players are like, trade me. And think about the Nets. But I said, hey, Warriors fans, at least we're not the Nets. Far from it. So that trade, like, and just moving we're looking at the Phoenix trade, the Dallas trade, and the Lakers slash Wolves slash Jazz trade. How does this change the West for you? Because I talked about this on the last episode, just because it was so instantaneous. But after having some time to think about it, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think the Suns one is going to be super interesting to see how quickly it can come together, right? Like obviously you have some really top end players, MVP level players. But do they have enough depth that's going to get them through? Like they basically traded their top three wings, right? And their top defenders. I mean, Jay Crowder wasn't playing anyway, but this is you're going to see a lot of Damian Lee, a lot more, which Warriors fans and a certain segment of Warriors fans is um, known to complain about him. Not me, but and you're gonna see Torrey Craig. Like, are those the guys that are gonna help you beat Luca and Kawhi? And I don't know. I don't know if that's gonna hold up. To be
I'm
honest,
waiting for them to sign Alfonso McKinney and Quinn Cook, man, because this is the closest thing I've seen to the 2019 Warriors uh, since the 2019 Warriors in terms of just being really top heavy,
yeah,
except that they're old. And I don't know
yeah,
if Chris Paul is going to make it through a deep playoff run. And then Booker's coming off injury. I don't know when KD comes back, but if they're healthy. There's a lot of big question marks
yeah,
with that. They do have a third of the season. Well, technically no, because they're not all going to be back
yeah,
yet.
yeah,
But on paper, it's a swing, So I'm not too sure. In a 7-game series, hypothetically, pitting the Warriors versus the Suns like that, and I'm sure the Suns will probably add some guys on the fringes and buyout.
hmm,
Who knows? Because they could probably promise some minutes to some
yeah,
buyout guys because they're so shallow on the bench. But, you know, I don't necessarily think like, oh, it's a done deal. I mean, I think if the Warriors play well, if they play inspired, like they can get up for games like we've seen them against the Grizzlies, the Cavs, the Celtics and stuff, then oh yeah, like let's go for it. You know what I mean?
hmm,
So that's kind of how I feel, and it's bolstered by the fact that you have another guy you could play in Gary
yeah.
Payton, as opposed to James Wiseman and the rest of the young guys just sitting over
Yeah,
there. So
in warm-ups, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we're focusing more on the West, but I'm surprised that uh I mean, the Nets have a million wings now, and I was surprised that none of them got rerouted, I guess, other than Jay Crowder. So that was a little bit surprising to me. I mean, not that they would have gone back to Phoenix or anything like that, but I think the Lakers did really well to the point it made me really mad. I couldn't believe what they got. It's like, really, the value of like that one pick and this big expiring contract, it just didn't make sense to me. I think reading some of the analyses of that trade, a lot of people think it's a wash, but it's kind of similar to the Warriors. Like now they actually have some actual rotation players, not replacement level players.
Mhm.
So I think you're going to see an upswing in them. Um, I think Minnesota, that was an interesting move to get Conley. It will stabilize them. I think he's still has a lot to offer. Um, so I do think the West got tougher. And I think if I'm wondering, so I don't know if you ever watch like track or like road races or something. There's like a there's like a pace that's always kind of generally set or agreed
Mhm.
upon, right? And then at a certain point,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
people start booking it and pulling away. And I wonder how much people are going to start, how many teams are going to really start pushing at this point.
I mean, clearly, all these teams that made moves are gonna start pushing. I think that Lakers trade, like when it was first announced, I was like, wow, that trade's good for all those teams. I hate it,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I want to laugh at
you know,
somebody.
and it does whatever the Jazz wanted. I'm stunned that Ainge couldn't try to pull that second draft pick from
Hmm.
the Lakers. And I've read people say like the Lakers, you're not so sure with D'Angelo Russell, but I mean, to me, I mean, we watched him play for maybe half a season or something, or maybe a little bit more than that, and the kid can shoot. He doesn't
Hmm.
have to play point guard. He has to play defense, but they've had worse defenders on their team. And if LeBron is playing point, you surround that guy with shooters,
Yep.
and he can shoot. Vanderbilt can shoot.
Well, Beasley can
Beasley
shoot.
can
Yeah,
shoot.
yeah.
And so like they're instantly better. And I think if they're healthy, I've been told Anthony Davis doesn't look that great right now, but if they can tighten up and move up the West a little bit, then I don't honestly, I don't really count out LeBron James. I don't think anyone should
Mhm.
if he gets into the tournament, just the way you
Yep.
shouldn't count out Steph and the Warriors if they get into the tournament. Real quick, the Kyrie to Dallas thing. I mean, it could help them a little bit. I really don't know. I just don't think. I mean, Kyrie's trying to get a new contract, so he'll probably, just try to focus on court stuff. But I just think they have too many flaws in general to really, really make a huge move. But all these West teams, man, it's like then you look at the teams that were actually at the top of the West before Denver, and then even though they have been like stinking it up for a few weeks now, the Grizzlies, the Clippers are making a move. They got some guys too.
Hmm.
There's a lot going on there. I think for the Wolves, I think it's a good move. It would be better for them if Conley wasn't so darn old,
Yeah.
but you're not going to get anything. I mean, D'Angelo Russell, they weren't going to sign him. They didn't sign him over the offseason. And we don't think he's very good. So we agree on that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like, wow, okay. So Minnesota gave up Andrew Wiggins, the pick that became Kuminga for a 35-year-old Mike Conley.
Yeah.
Um, I'll take it. I'll take it.
It goes to show like how these quote unquote assets from picks and draft picks and rookies and players in the league, like it wildly fluctuates. Like few months ago, Kyrie, nobody would have traded for him, and now they got a pretty good deal for him. So it's like, man, things change fast in the NBA. So it's gonna be interesting this back end, this home
Mhm.
stretch. So what I want to see is I want to see the Warriors say, we're sick of playing so inconsistently with bad focus and bad energy, and like let's push too, right? Um, that's what I want to see. I don't care what seed they get, preferably not in the play-in, but it still remains that if they have Steph, they have Draymond, they have Clay, they always have a chance. But they've looked more vulnerable and more inconsistent than ever. So I just want to see more consistency.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then we'll see what happens in the Warriors
Yeah.
Invitational.
Yeah. I mean, the
Can't call it
Warriors,
that this year, man. I have no confidence in that.
like I said, the Warriors, they're in a far better position than they were yesterday in terms of just on court stuff. And if they can get healthy, I have faith in this team. Again, they need to get somebody a little bit bigger, or JaMychal Green needs to play this well as that emergency big off the bench down the
Yeah.
road. I like that he's tough at least. And we'll see what happens. Let me ask you, because OG Anunoby was a name that everybody was pining for. I did not want to give up Jonathan Kuminga for him, and that seems to have been a sticking point in this. Would you have made any kind of trade that included Kuminga for Anunoby?
No, I don't think so. Especially if Wiseman was already out the door. When I was thinking about today that like that nobody was going to walk through that door and fix the Warriors. I was thinking like, well, is OG gonna be that guy? Like, no, I don't think so. I like him as a player quite a bit, but he's not gonna fix what ails them. I don't know who would. So I don't think it makes sense to, you already got rid of a young guy who was, costing you a lot of money, but who still has potential. And you're definitely not going to get rid of the other guy who cost you less but has shown more, right? Who's already part of your rotation and is looking on the upswing and is still barely 20, right? So, or 20 and a half or whatever he is. So if anything, maybe, if you're in the room in that meeting between Lacob and Myers, and maybe Lacob's like, okay, fine, we'll trade Wiseman. And then Myers like, well, I can get OG too. It's like, no, you can't. You can't trade all my babies. So maybe that was the backroom dealings they had to strike.
Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't have done it either. Obviously, I'm a big Kuminga fan, and I don't know. Like, I think for his contract, for his age, for his ceiling, and he may not be as good as OG right now, but I think he can be sooner than we expect.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important to keep him around in general. I would have been pretty bummed if we passed him up for a guy who, is not an all-star, and of course the Warriors would have had to give up other things too. So,
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. One thing on Wiseman, I was going to say, it's like, I have these memories, right? Like, we all remember when he first came into the league, went coast to coast, and it was like, he's the next David Robinson. And then he went, the next Giannis. And then he's 5 second rounders. Right? I was like, this is a precipitous drop off.
Yeah.
And then he's, the guy that you could have signed over the summer instead.
Yep.
So it is what it is, man.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts on this one?
Well, let's just see what happens from here on out. Just add a little bit of depth, maybe depth big, and let's roll. Let's do this.
Yeah. Like I said at the top, the vets, they got what they wanted, and great. Go out there and focus. Don't be so three happy.
Mm-hmm.
Don't foul so much. Don't turn the ball over. Get to the free throw line. If you do those things, then you'll win a lot of games, because those are the consistent things that they need to work on as a team. And it'll be a shame if all of a sudden they just start doing it now, because it's like, all right, we got rid of Wiseman and we have GP2 back. But I'll take it. If this season ends in a finals victory, I will be ecstatic and I will be stunned, and it'll be the greatest coup of the season for these guys, So. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on.
Always.